And welcome back, and thank you for staying with us on Monday Special. It's time for a conversation, and already your questions are coming in. Thank you for them. Let's just begin by introducing our guests. Right in the middle is Dr. Samuel Torre. He's a commissioner with the National Land Commission, and in particular the chairman of the Historical Land Injustices Committee. And to his right is Kikuyu legislator Kimani Waishungwa, and next to me is Kitutu Chache South MP Richard Onyonka, and you're all welcome to the program. So the question of land, which is an emotive question, has resurfaced in political debate, and it's complex on various fronts, gentlemen. Of course, there's a question of the historical land injustices, there's a question of settlements and the sale of land. Now, the Constitution, as we are all aware, has guaranteed each Kenyan the right to live and hold property anywhere. Yet, even with this constitutional right, there's still a lot of debate surrounding who should live where. I'll begin with you, Dr. Is there any legitimacy to telling people not to sell their ancestral land to people who are not traditionally from that area?
Perhaps from the point of view that if we remember the whole debate about historical land injustices, you look at, for example, what Njonjo Commission did, what Ndungu Commission did, what the National Accord, and made land an Agenda 4 item. And that particular National Accord is the one that for the first time allowed us to discuss the commonly held view that there are people who are called visitors in some of our areas. Remember that that is what was said by implied, or at least, or even perhaps even stated by some of these commissions like WAKI as part of what caused, partly what caused the post-election violence. That's why the National Accord insisted that this should be an Agenda 4 item that must be tackled. And that came also through with the TJRC, who also delved into the land issue, especially the historical land injustice issue. In fact, the chapter 2 of the report is one of the very well written chapters, and it is on land. And that in turn, after the TJRC, the commission, National Land Commission, was then supposed to take over and investigate and propose redress for both past and present land injustices. That's according to Article 67(2)(e). So you can see that this has been with us, and we have made attempts to address it and to codify until it ended into the Constitution. And now, with the Commission in the National Land Commission Act, through the Land Laws Amendment Act of last year, now we have a section 15 of our law which tries to codify what actions we need to take in order to address this issue in a systematic way as proposed in the National Accord. Having
said that, Dr. Zero in for me the reasons why you would then argue that there is to a degree legitimacy in telling communities not to sell ancestral land to those who are not traditionally from that area.
Perhaps not necessarily telling, but let us look at it this way, that ancestral lands are ancestral lands. They have not only a physical value, they also have a spiritual angle or a spiritual dimension. And so once you call something an ancestral land, then in many parts of the world, people like to keep these ancestral. This is where you have your graves and your graveyards and so on. So I'm not sure, I wouldn't like to be too engrossed in whether they should tell people or not. In fact, people ordinarily like to keep their ancestral lands.
I suppose you're making a distinction between what then would be called community land or indigenous land where where certain communities live, as opposed to what would be sacred sites. Is that
no,
what you think?
I think it's slightly different. You see, indigenous would be almost the same as ancestral, That is where people, their core, that's where they live, that's how they define themselves geographically. And so when people talk of ancestral land, this is now what we have come to call community land for purposes of our law. So that now we have a Community Land Act, which is supposed to guide. In the past it was called trust land. And the colonial legacy was that it be held in trust for the native by the county council.
Right. So Kimani, listening to that explanation from the Commission, at what point do you think the conversation on this, who lives where, which is such an emotive question in this country, at what point does it change from an economic or cultural discussion to something that borders on hate?
I think, and we should be very honest with ourselves as a country, and agree that we are governed in this country by a constitution that we all passed in 2010 and agreed to abide by the provisions of this constitution. And Article 39 and Article 40 of the constitution, as the good commissioner has very well articulated, is very clear that you have, as a Kenyan, the right to live and reside anywhere in Kenya. 2, you have the right to acquire and own property anywhere, and actually is Article 40 that says property of any description in any part of Kenya. Therefore, as much as we have tried to address the issues to do with community land, and I must tell you that indeed this 11th Parliament did enact the Community Land Act that was passed by the National Assembly, I think, in August of 2016 and passed on to the Senate. And indeed, a mediated version actually is the one that was later passed, I think, in August, towards the end of August last year. And that then defines what constitutes community land, what actually constitutes the definition of that community, and the steps that would be followed if that community land was to be transacted in any way. And therefore, that law which is anchored in this constitution is what every person in this country should abide to. Therefore, the calls for this and that community should not reside here. I want to say that for the people pushing that agenda, is a clear manifestation that these are people who are bankrupt of ideas on how to move this country forward in terms of solving land issues. And let us not even pretend that the issue that happened in Kajiado had anything to do with historical land injustices. It was everything to do with somebody who has no agenda, no idea on what to do to resolve people's problems. And I'll remind you, Anne, when the good former Prime Minister uttered the very unfortunate and reckless words that he uttered in Kajiado, he said that nikumaliza ufukara. Ufukara is poverty. And you need to ask yourself as a Kenyan, how do you reduce poverty? By chasing away people of certain communities from a certain area. I want to tell you,
Anne, going to the territory of talking about chasing away anybody, because and stick first of all, Kimani, to the question of the issue of land. I don't want to get into the sentiments of the former Prime Minister, because if in fact they will be investigated, then it will be investigated, and then we will be able to talk about it. But what I want to come to is what you have mentioned in terms of the economic question, that it's about dealing with poverty. And Richard, perhaps you will explain this from the perspective of your coalition. You by extension, the coalition has argued that there are those who were disenfranchised because they were perhaps hoodwinked when selling their land, sold it at throwaway prices, etc. In what way do you believe that there should be any form of restitution for that in a marketplace where it is willing buyer, willing seller?
Thank you, Anne. I think for me, I would like to look at this issue basically from a three-point kind of approach. Number one, it is true that we have issues about historical injustices. These are cases where Kenyans, the Kenyan political elite has either colluded, engaged and participated in disenfranchising people, who are seen as the locals. In other words, you have an issue whereby if you have people in Malindi or people in Kwale who feel that historically the land which they were, and Lamu, land which they were entitled to, this land, if there was to be a fast clause of sale, or if there was to be a transfer done, then these communities are entitled to actually owning and having the right to be the first people to have this land. This is exactly the same issue that you have in Rift Valley. We are always talking about cost, land issues and everything. The truth is, in the Rift Valley, you have thousands and thousands of acres of land, which, for example, are pieces of land whereby you have tea estates which are producing tea, and these farms are owned by people who the indigenous, excuse me, if you will allow me, feel that they are entitled to this land. And if you realize that the leases of these lands now are up for grabs. In fact, it's one of the major issues that is happening in North Rift, and is one of the other issues that is happening in the South Rift. Number three, you have cases where individuals, including now what the former Prime Minister was talking about, that the Maasai as a community, should they agree, because we have willing buyer, willing seller, Daktari, should we accommodate this willing buyer, willing seller attitude whereby the Maasai, who may not necessarily, because of their poverty, and that is the argument that former Prime Minister was making, should we then tell the Maasai not to sell the land? The question then you ask is this an appropriate argument that you can make politically to persuade the Maasai not to sell their land when they are actually languishing in poverty?
The argument has already been made.
That is true. Does this then mean that you are actually trying to create unnecessary animosity within the Maasai community?
That's not the question that I'm putting to you. The question that I'm putting to you is this. Yes. In areas where you believe that there has been that sort of whether it was an understanding issue or a poverty issue, whatever be that as it may, or even if you said, you know, the leases are coming up, etc. What is the NASA solution to addressing what you think was an economic,
historical, economic,
yes, injustice,
socio-political injustice? Number one,
let
us go to the Truth, Justice and Historical Commission. We have had issues of the Njonjo Commission, we had issues of the Ndugu Commission, we had issues whereby we are supposed to discuss the issues of what do we do with the people who have been disenfranchised. And for me, I really plead with Kenyans. We are not discussing about people who are taking land from other people. And Mheshimiwa Ichung'wah, this argument is not about a community being taken to an area where certain, where certain individuals are now taking land from other people. What I'm saying is this, that even when there is a free market, even when there's demand and supply, even when you are trying to argue that yes, Kenyans are free to buy land everywhere, including my own area, I can tell you today, the area that I come from, the Kitutu Church South constituency, has got very many non-Kitutu people who have moved in. Excuse me, let me make my argument. Who have moved in and purchased this land. My responsibility as a member of parliament is to respect their right to own that land. Exactly. My responsibility is to encourage them, if they want to invest in my area, that I will actually agree with them to proceed to continue to buy the property, because it is a free market.
I'm not getting what you're saying.
Yes.
So are you saying that there should be restitution for poor people who
their land? No, what I'm saying, let me clarify. What I'm saying is this. The Prime Minister was right in arguing and telling the Maasai community that please, even when you are under poverty, don't sell your land. But at the same time, we acknowledge in the opposition that it is accepted with the Kenyan socio-political, economic undertakings that a Kenyan is free to own land everywhere and anywhere.
And Mheshimiwa is really struggling to try and justify something that I said was reckless and dangerous of what Raila said in Kajiado.
I want
to tell you the number of Kisii people living in Kajiado, the number of Luya people, Kikuyus, Kalenjins living in Kajiado is dangerous. That kind of talk is dangerous. Let me just answer. Now to get back to the question you asked on land pricing.
Don't tribalize. Richard, let's allow him to get to his point.
You know, when you have no point to make, you really want to shout back
Kimani,
so that someone doesn't make his point.
Kimani.
You asked a very genuine question on whether there is anything you can call away, throw away prices. I will tell you, I bought my own land in Kikuyu where I live in 2005, 2006 at a price that is today a very small fraction, maybe 0.25 of the cost of land today. I do not think the people who sold me that land today can say they sold it at a throwaway price. Therefore, if it is economics, let us address the economic issue. And if you are talking about poverty in Kajiado or anywhere else in Masai, the solution is not to chase away people who are coming to buy land for value.
Kimani, I want you to desist from using terms such as
chase away,
because that is not
the Prime Minister never said that people should be chased away.
I want you to stick to the issues.
Let me correct it by putting it this way, Anne.
No, Kimani.
Because what was said, Anne.
Kimani, you have had your chance. And I've corrected you twice on this issue.
But the gentleman said they should not have come here.
Sir, I will not have it a third time. Dr. Torre, you know, there has been the feeling and the sentiment from the opposition that the question of land has not been conclusively dealt with by this particular administration, and that there are certain, perhaps even certain segments of the population who have not been addressed by the existing land laws. From your commission standpoint, what restitution has been made in terms of dealing with historical land injustices?
First of all, Anne, I don't think you can really put it to one administration. The law as we have it now defines historical land injustices as resulting from decisions made way from the time of the colonial administration. In fact, our law says 15th June 1895 to 27th August 2010. That period is what is covered by the historical land injustices as we have defined them in our law. And maybe if we were to move away from the political overtones and look at it in a very objective manner, there is a feeling of real grievance by the common mwananchi that an injustice or a set of injustices were visited upon them during that area, that period that I have indicated. Now, these injustices, real or perceived, have driven the Kenyan people to a certain mode of thinking. And it is this that the National Accord pleaded with Kenyans to address in a dispassionate manner. So, for example, what constitutes a historical land injustice? It's not every action on land.
Right.
It is that action which is perceived by an individual or a group of people that it is unjust. And it is that action, even perhaps resulting from law, that is perceived to be unjust. It is that action which, after attempts to try and resolve, still remains as being considered as unjust.
And given that you've said that this, of course, predates the current administration, I am asking how would you evaluate or score the administration's performance in terms of addressing these injustices?
Now, it's difficult to have a scorecard because the law, maybe one of the things we'll say is this. First, although we don't have as good a law as we had proposed, but we have a law. Section 15 of the National Land Commission Act is now in place, Unfortunately, it does not have enforcement mechanisms and so on, but there is a law. I don't know now who you credit. The other thing that we can say is this, that we have had real difficulties in getting a national understanding that we need to address historical land injustices in a timely manner so that we can achieve national closure, so that we don't have all the time to be saying, oh, this was done to us, oh, this was done to us.
We need closure.
We need closure. And that's why we have proposed a 10-year period within which all the egregious, land injustices or considered land injustices should be resolved, and we say full stop.
All right.
I think
what has this administration done?
To a large extent, I'll tell you, for instance, the passing into law of the Community Land Bill is one of the things that was actually envisaged even by the Constitution that we passed in 2010. With the other, probably like 3 or 4 other legislations that have been passed by this 11th Parliament in relation to land matters. Of course, appreciating how grave the question of land and how sensitive it is to the Kenyan people. But I want to agree with the Commissioner here that, one, historical injustices relate to things that came in an unjust way. And I want to tell you, Anne, and tell the nation that where people go out and purchase land for value, that is not injustice. Those are people who are willing buyers and willing sellers. And therefore, any responsible leader in this country, be it a political leader, whatever else you are, cannot go to tell people that you cannot buy land here. It is unjust to buy land for value, because you're also making a mockery of the people who are selling that land. Mind you, some of the people making these statements have also bought land in Kitengela, and they are rearing snails and slugs in Kitengela. I do not know why they did not, when they're asking people, why did you come to buy land here? I do not know why they're also telling
Having said that, my question to you is what this administration has done to address historical land injustices. Other than legislation, is there anything else you would say to say that the Jubilee administration has not shied away from the question of land?
Part of the TJRC reports address the issue of land, the land question in the Coast Province, and something that our colleagues, who I said are truly bankrupt of ideas on how to solve many of these problems, could not do even when they held the Ministry of Lands in the last Nusum Kata government. But this administration, within the last 3 years only, look at the number of title deeds that land has been adjudicated, because that was one of the issues that the Commission was to address and the nation was to address. The question of land adjudication and issuing of title deeds. But even then, when this administration has issued title deeds, you've had them going, because they are bankrupt of ideas, going to tell people that these title deeds are not worth the paper they are written on. And I think we just need to be honest.
What has the administration failed to do in the question of land?
First of all, Anne, I would like to say, Kimani, I happen to have been in the coalition government. I want you to understand.
That's the Nusum Kata one.
I want you to understand that it was a government that was very, very difficult to manage because of the reason of the vested interest on both sides. I want you to also get it off your mind.
That is why we will not allow you to have another one with this election.
That is your dream.
That's what you are looking for.
We are
not going there. You are just being a heckler, and you are a serious man. I respect
Richard, you. Richard, if you would get to your point, yes. Sir, and my question to you is, what has the administration failed to do?
My point, Anne, my position is very simple, and our position in the opposition is very simple. This problem is not necessarily a Jubilee problem. This is a problem that is historical. This is a problem we have got. The TJRC report has nothing to do with being vindictive and actually pointing fingers at anybody. Kenyans must be in a position today where we are going to accept that, yes, we have issues which are land-based.
What has this administration failed to do?
Providing titles is only about 10 or 20% of solving the problem. There are issues which exist in terms of, in certain areas of this country, there are people and there are communities that feel that their rights have been denied them by either historical governments and historical...
Sir, please be concise. What has this administration failed to do?
It has not dealt with the issues which have been brought by one, the Ndungu report. It has not dealt with the issues which are in the TRC.
What has it shied away from in the Ndungu report?
The reason is, if you look at Kenya today, most of the ruling elite are actually the problem to the land problem. They own land, they have purchased this land, grabbed most of this land, and they have not been in a position where they can come up and say, let us solve this problem. That is the problem of Kenya today. I'll give you an example. Why is it that we are not able to computerize the provision of titles, the geomapping of land title deeds in Kenya? Is because most of the ruling members of this community, of the political class in Kenya.
And so when the ministry says that it has done that now you can get computerized records, and I think we've seen a lot of that imagery. You believe
that's just imagery? Look, go to Rwanda. Who did the geomapping in Rwanda? It's a Kenyan company.
I think
we are not today. We are not able to.
The land registry is not computerized.
It will never be settled unless the political class in this country decides that we are going to solve this problem once and for all.
I think, to be honest, Anne, on the question of digitizing our land registry, I think is work in progress, and Mheshimiwa should be honest enough with Kenyans to say that that is work in progress. And the gentleman here from the Commission can tell you
that has begun.
The land records in this country are enormous. You cannot even begin to compare Rwanda, that is a fraction of the size of this country, and the land.
But at least you can even start with start with 2 counties. Why is it that we are not even able to get 2 counties where you can walk in, you give your PIN number, you pick out who owns a piece of land? It's deliberate because they don't pay taxes, they don't manage. They are not willing to allow Kenyans to know who owns land in this country, unless we agree that we are going to solve the problem of who owns what and how they got it. In fact, how we got it is not a problem. Let us fix the problem. Start with us knowing where is the land, who owns, for example.
Right.
Why can't you get a title?
Is it something we'll do at the snap of a finger?
No,
or is it a process?
Do you have to take 60 years?
It has taken successive governments
for the last 50 years. For the last 50 years, it's because the ruling elite is the one that owns all the land in this country, and they don't want to solve the problem of land in this country. And unless we solve the problem of land in this country, Kenyans are going to kill each other.
Richard,
that is what, and we should stop Kenyans from the incitement of people killing each other.
Because, Richard, I think that's an unfortunate sentiment to make, and it belittles the collective will of the people to move forward from where we've been. I'm going to leave it at that, and perhaps come to you, Dr. Torre, for a final comment, given the emotiveness of the subject.
Good.
Where do you believe there is yet much to be done in terms of land reform?
I think there is a lot. There is a lot, and even from looking at our Waheshimiwa, you can already see why there is already a problem. Because what is required is a systematic approach, a well-resourced approach. What has happened now is we do these things in fits and starts. When we at the Commission proposed the Historical Land Injustices Bill, we had proposed it as a standalone act which had clear mechanisms for dealing with 2 tiers of the issue. The fact, the fact of history, and the law. So we had proposed that there would be an arm of the Commission that would deal with the facts, researching, because not every claim, Anne, that comes your way is necessarily true.
Right.
Some of them are just made up, some of them are, So you have to, in order to resolve historical land injustices, the Commission must be equipped with a wherewithal to do thorough research, to do thorough investigation, sometimes even go beyond the land records and go into facts of history. Again, the biggest weakness that we have now is once the Commission has done whatever it has done, the way the law is now, it is supposed to recommend. It is not told to who. It is to recommend to whatever organization they think can do the job. But even that recommending has not been, directed. What we have done is we have proposed rules and regulations to try and address that. But what I can see will happen, and again, Anne, I'm saying this, that we can't keep complaining. We have a law, we shall try to make it work at the Commission. But what I can see will happen is we will come with a recommendation. I suppose we will have to go and register it in court for it to be enforceable, because the enforcement mandate is not with us. But we need resources, and that is what we don't have. We need the skills. We can get the skills if we have the resources. We need also, and remember, time is ticking. We have already lost a year since the law started, and we have only 10 years.
Right.
So we really must get the Waheshimiwas, when they go back to Parliament in September, to really give the Commission the support, the political support, the resource support, and the resources, and especially to help us sort out the legal gaps that now exist. If we can remove this thing from being so emotive, it's a problem we have to solve. Why do we have that excuse all the time, emotive, emotive? It's a problem that we have said in our constitution we want to save and achieve national closure.
So we just got to do it. Of course, I'm sorry, we're out of time, Kimani. It's certainly not a question that has, since the country gained independence, is a question we've been trying to solve. We don't have all the answers on one program, but I certainly thank you for coming and sharing your thoughts. We're taking a short break. The sport is up next.